A little bit more, we have the Chief Executive Officer of Datakrew, Dr. Sumanta Bose, to join us on stage. Sir. How much is your EV battery worth? This is a question worth answering because throughout today's event, we have been talking about various aspects as to how EV adoption would happen in the next few years and decades to come in terms of innovations from digital technologies, material sciences, and overall the circular economy around EVs. To answer this question, we need some conversations, we need some brainstorming, we need some thinking. And that's what we're going to do today in the next couple of 20 minutes. On the screen you see something. Any guesses what this is? Is this a password, passcode to some vault, or some encrypted information? Any guesses what this is from the audience floor? Wi-Fi password? Good one. I think this could make a good Wi-Fi password. But this is a Roman number for 1884. That's the year first electric vehicle ever came to the road, invented by Thomas Parker. And guess what? The range was an impressive 60 kilometers. That's all the way from Tuas to Changi. The very first electric vehicle ever invented by humans. And the price of this was $1,600 in 1900, which translates to around 50,000 in today's value with inflation adjustment. Now, while we're talking about ranges and records, we've come a long way, all the way from 1884 till today in terms of EVs. You know, the world's fastest EV runs at more than 400 kilometers per hour with 0 to 100 seconds in less than a second, 100 kilometers in less than a second. And in this whole innovation, there is one particular moment that stands out. In the year 1991, the first commercial lithium-ion batteries came to the market, and in the year 2008, they were started using in EVs, with Roadster being the first EV which used commercial lithium-ion batteries. And the innovation around lithium-ion batteries have been so profound that the inventors were awarded the 2019 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Lithium-ion battery actually stands out in a sea of different options out there in terms of battery chemistries and battery technologies. You know, but why is this lithium-ion battery special? There are several factors which determine how good and efficient a battery would be for commercial applications, such as energy density, which is the amount of energy that you can store within a given space or volume. Rechargeability, how many cycles will the battery be able to be recharged until it lasts effectively. Energy efficiency, which means how much of the stored inherent energy does it convert into electrical energy. Self-discharge rate, which means without use it should not discharge on its own and be able to retain maximum energy over a period of time. And the most important and economic factor being cost per unit energy, which means to get 1 watt hour or 1 kilowatt hour of energy, how many dollars do you have to spend? Now this is the most important driving factor when it comes to choice of batteries and adoption of batteries. And lithium-ion happens to be one of the leading technologies. One of the earlier speakers has touched a great deal on the different chemistries and the different economics around it. But for EV owners, fleet operators and OEMs, it is important to understand that this translates to around 30 to 40% of the total cost of an electric vehicle, which is a significant number. Now, with this in view, it is important to understand and ask, do electric vehicle batteries degrade over time? Because at the end of the day, you are the asset owners or asset operators. The answer is yes, it does. So, just like phone batteries, electric vehicle batteries are designed to last for as long as possible and possibly the entire lifespan of the vehicle, but with usage, with repeated charging and discharging, they lose their inherent capacity. And after about 80%, you will start to see a degradation in the range that you get out of your EV vehicles. Now, what are some of the factors that reduces your battery health and therefore its value, its economic value? So to capture this, I came up with this acronym. It doesn't mean anything, just, it's easy to remember because it has a, round sound to it. So it's ATORD, which is firstly abuse or misuse of batteries in any way or form. Mechanical abuse, thermal abuse, electrical abuse. Second is temperature extremes, exposure to extreme temperatures, either during parking or during driving. Third is overcharging after 100%. We take it for granted that the BMS or the charger would do a cutoff, auto cutoff, and then we just forget it over there. And while it does auto cutoff, they're engineered brilliantly. But in this process of overcharging, there is some amount of degradations happening in the battery. R, which is rash driving. Now, unlike fuels, batteries supply you with electrons, ions. And the faster you accelerate, the higher is the current surge, which is captured in what's technically known as C rate. And the harsher you brake, there is a regenerative current, which is good by nature, and it's used to recharge your batteries. But this harsh acceleration and braking is going to generate huge amount of C rate surges and may result in what's technically known as imbalancing. And it's not good for your EV batteries. And lastly, discharging them below 15% and risking entering into the deep discharge state. So deep discharge states essentially means that you have, depleted some inherent properties of the battery. Of course, you can recharge it. It'll take some time to charge back again, but you've done a great disservice to your batteries. So to summarize, these are some of the factors. And for the technical audience, here, let me touch upon a little bit more briefly. What are the factors which we need to capture in order to understand whether such kind of degradations are happening or not? So those three factors, key factors, are voltage, current, and temperature. So there could be a overvoltage situation. So BMSs are designed to do a CCCV, which stands for constant current, constant voltage charging profile. But if there is overvoltage, it can cause damage to your batteries. If there are, as I mentioned earlier, current surges, which results in high C rate or extremely low high C rate, it will result in battery imbalance. And temperatures, high temperature and low temperature, they can result in what's called as dendrite formation or SEI growth. These are again factors which can eventually lead to even short circuits and fires. So we have to be really wary and careful of these extremes from happening. Now, you see, over the time of ownership of your vehicle, the battery health, which comes from capacity, which is the ability of the battery to hold charge, decreases, but it decreases non-linearly. In the initial few months or years, depending on how frequently you use your EV, it's going to be very, very good, which is the first phase. The second phase is the quasi-linear degradation, in which you have a gradual degradation of your battery's capacity and therefore its value. And then there comes a knee point. Beyond the knee point, it's absolutely not recommended to keep using your batteries because you've already entered into a high risk zone. This is where your batteries need to go either for refurbishing, remanufacturing, reusing, or recycling. But the question is, which of these options is most relevant? Let's come to that. So now that we have established how battery value decreases over time, it's important to understand that as technologists, and particularly our company which deals a lot with vehicle data, how do we leverage vehicle data to determine the remaining capacity and therefore its value? So we already spoke about the value decreasing over time, first life, second life, and then recycling. Over the time of the battery's lifespan, the invested amount would decrease, and therefore the salvageable amount, it gets lesser and lesser. But in principle, this is understood, this is all fine. But to put a value to it, to put a number to it, we need rich data in real time from the batteries. For that, we need to be able to capture how our EVs are performing in real time using telemetry devices, and then use machine learning models on top of it to be able to train and predict how the capacity of a battery would degrade over time and how would it impact the value of the battery so that decision making can be done for its second life use. So this is where we come in. What we do is we capture data from batteries in real time across different types and groups of EV using this device which I'm holding in my hand right now. It's a very compact device, and this is able to capture information about the performance of a EV battery in real time. How are the individual cells working? What is the current levels? What is the internal temperature of the battery, and a bunch of other parameters. Then we merge the data from different EVs in the field in our cloud system to be able to create an EV digital twin, which utilizes a multi-physics simulation model consisting of a cell model and the pack model to be able to do a IBPC, which stands for Ideal Battery Performance Characteristics. We try to simulate how an ideal EV battery would and should perform over its lifespan through what's called as aging analysis. Then we compare this with the real data which comes from the batteries, the driving profile, the driving patterns, the parking tendencies, and so on. This comparison helps us to create profiles specific to every single EV and then make effective predictions over the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months as to how the capacity and related parameters would evolve. Also, it was putting us in a position to be able to do what's called as predictive maintenance for EVs, since we are already sitting on rich data sets and making effective predictions. Now, these inferences can be effectively used by fleet companies who own the vehicles, they're the vehicle owners, OEMs, to be able to make better data-driven decisions for R&D applications and improved designs, and second life users, who would include companies like recycling companies, companies who would leverage the used batteries to make second life applications. We saw brilliant use earlier on where it was discussed as to how the charger could come to the EVs. That's another potential application of used EV batteries. So this is the whole landscape, what you see on the screen as to what we are trying to achieve. Now that we have discussed this in great depth, one question which comes up is, there are so many types of EVs out there. There are so many types of chemistries out there. How would one model relate to another? How would one how quickly can you make a prediction? How much data do you need to make a prediction? So to answer these, there is a technique known as privacy preserving EV agnostic federated machine learning. That may sound a mouthful, but I'll make it understandable, in which what we do is we consider different EV models and the learnings from them, which are embedded in the models itself. These learnings can be mathematically combined while preserving the privacy. Data ownership is very important. You would not want your EV's data to be revealing your private information, but the learnings can be taken and be put into a federated learning model, which what it does is essentially it's like a super brain. It takes the insights or the wisdom, you can say, and then be able to make effective predictions while adhering to and falling under the regulations of PDPA and GDPR and other data privacy requirements. Now that we have established what we do and how we do this, coming back to the theme of today's discussion, which is how does your EV battery valuation impact you as individual owners? So let's look at a few questions which we as individual EV owners ask ourselves. What is the total cost of ownership of our vehicles? What happens when an EV needs, there are any faults and it needs repair? Who covers the warranty and replacements? What's the insurance premium, and how does all of this tie back to the cost of the EV and eventually the battery? To answer this, let's deep dive into what is the cost of owning a car. So there are various components, and I'm sure you know of it. But there is particularly one component, which is the ARF, Advanced Recovery Fee, which consists of an amount that we all as individual owners have to bear, which is then utilized for safely recycling the EV batteries. You know it or not, you are anyway going to have to pay this because it's part of the ecosystem as how things are, how cost of owning an electric car is. And this forms part of the enhanced producer responsibility on the part of OEMs. And then it plays a very crucial role in enabling the circular economy for the growth and adoption of EVs all along. This is very, very important to all of us because being in Singapore, we will no longer be able to purchase or register ICE vehicles from 2030 onwards. So in 2040, all vehicles running on the Singapore roads will run on clean energy. And by 2030, no more new registration of ICE vehicles. That's why it is important for all of us to understand what is the value of our EV batteries going to be. Because it has a direct financial impact on you. So at the end of the life cycle, Paul talked about 10 years lifespan. So at the end of the life cycle of owning a battery, the SOH, which is state of health, determines what happens to it, what's the fate of it, whether it goes for a, repurposing and reusing in energy storage applications, or has it depleted so much that it's not salvageable and usable anymore safely, and the only option left is to recycle the materials and put it back in the circular economy. So this does impact all of us. And the EV circular economy, which has been talked earlier on, and the various players, including, of course, the underlying layer, which is the policymakers, followed by the different parties, such as EV OEMs, owners, such as fleets or individual owners like you and me, recycling companies, reusing and refurbishing companies, all of us have a role to play in the making, using, and reusing of EVs and EV batteries in particular. And particularly being a startup in this ecosystem, our role is to enable the different players with real-time battery data to understand its performance, its safety aspects, and its value to be able to make better data-driven decisions